Iran prepared to bomb oil terminals as Israel and Turkey conflict heats up. Like and subscribe.
The economy seems to be not looking so good.
True.
Lot of confusion from the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent. Yesterday he was out on the White House lawn and he said he didn't know why oil prices were not coming down. Obviously, the market manipulation isn't as good as it used to be. So, Dimitri, what do you think is going on in our golden age economy?
Yeah, I was a securities class actions lawyer.
Before we continue with this video, I wanted to just show you an interesting tweet about what's happening in the oil market. Veteran oil trader Mark Eckhard thinks the calm may end around August 22nd to 24th. His thesis, buyers are delaying physical purchases as long as possible. Once contracts needs become unavoidable, concentrated buying could hit a supply-constrained market all at once. That's how 85 oil becomes 95 to 110 very quickly. Let's hear this.
Let's see what happens by the 22nd through the 24th. And my guess is that's where you're going to see that rebound in prices, because I think we're going to go quickly from 85. There's a real good chance in the next 7 to 10 days we'll be somewhere between $95 and $110 a barrel. Why is that? Traders are waiting patiently to see if they buy that last amount of physical oil that gets them their contracts fulfilled, or do they get to have it at a discount? And they're playing timing against quantity and limitation and supply.
Basically, this is the media's fault. The media is full of, oh, there's an oil glut. Oil is going to go down. Just wait a little bit and oil will be lower. Doing all that, of course, to reassure the market. One of the consequences of that is that people for refineries that need to buy oil are like, well, if oil's going to be cheaper later, then I'll just wait. And they wait for oil to fall. They wait for oil to fall. It doesn't fall. Instead of falling, it goes up and up and up and up. And they don't want, now that it's gone up, they feel terrible if they buy it down. So they wait a little bit more to see if it'll fall back down. And it won't fall back down, spoiler. And then they ran out of time, they have to buy. And that sends oil, up. So that's what we might be looking at.
But my history, 40 years of doing this, I believe you're going to see some real robust trading starting about the 22nd or 23rd. And that could be a $5 to $15 a barrel increase.
Oil is going up, TLDR.
Lawyer, Brandon, before I became a geopolitical analyst and got more involved in human rights. And when the great financial crisis happened, I was prosecuting securities class actions in Canada. I had just returned from the United States, Canada. I had started my career in New York. And we did a case, I remember quite distinctly, because it's all coming back to me now, looking at what's happening in the markets. And
there are a lot of similarities. I see them too.
And it was against a subprime mortgage lender based in Detroit. It was called FMF Capital. And the company went public in Canada because it couldn't get listed in the United States. And it did a public offering in 2005. And within 7 months, it blew up. It just went bankrupt. So we had a client at our firm who happened to have invested an ungodly amount of money in this company, and he came to me and asked me to pursue a securities class action, so I did. And we ended up extracting, the company was bust, so we had to rely entirely on the executives and the insurers of the company to fund the settlement. We got a pretty good settlement for them, and I remember the day that I went into court to asked the court to approve the settlement, because all settlements and securities class actions and class actions have to be approved by a court. Mm-hmm. And as I'm standing in my hotel room, ironing my shirt, getting ready to go into court, I'm watching Bloomberg, and they announced that New Century Financial, the largest subprime mortgage lender in the United States, had collapsed.
Yep.
And the market was going completely berserk. Why am I telling you the story? Because
it was crashing. The market was crashing.
This all sounds, what I'm experiencing now as a market observer and to some degree a participant, is eerily similar, except it's worse, because the real problem, the core problem, it wasn't the only problem in the great financial crisis, was that these mortgage-backed securities were ticking time bombs. And, once the adjustable rate mortgages kicked in and so forth, and the frauds, the loans, all became exposed.
Yes. Ninja loans. No job, income, or assets. Yeah, that's it.
There was going to
Ninja loans.
be an explosion. That wasn't the only problem, but that really was the core problem. Right now, we have a confluence of severe economic problems. We have a $40 trillion debt in the United States.
We do.
We have, 30-year bonds, actually all bonds, 10 years, 20 years, going back to levels they were at 2007, at the beginning of the great financial crisis. The spending by the U.S. government, and this is a bipartisan sin. It isn't strictly Republican by any means. The Democrats are entirely responsible for this as well.
Yeah, government spending, that's always both parties.
The debt load is becoming unmanageable. We have the soaring inflation as a result of the crisis in West Asia, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the partial closure of the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. We have a trade war, which is effectively happening all around the world. There are attacks happening on maritime shipping. A devastating war in Ukraine, which has brought about the evisceration of the European economy, because Europe committed economic suicide by cutting itself off from a relatively inexpensive Russian gas and stable supplies of Russian gas. So you have all of this and more, plus the level of incompetence in the Western governments. Economic mismanagement and incompetence is stunning, and this feels
Corruption.
to me like a much, much worse and much more dangerous.
You're a politician in a leadership position in a Western economy. You're, the deck officer on the Titanic, and you know it. And so you're not interested in trying to right the ship. You already know the ship is sinking. You're just interested in getting on a lifeboat and driving as much cash as you can before you leave.
Scenario. And the problems, let's be clear, the problems that brought about the financial crisis in 2007, 2009 were never resolved. Mm-hmm. Basically, the banks were bailed out. Nobody was held accountable for this massive fraud.
No one was held accountable on Wall Street because no one on Wall Street was responsible for the 2008 financial crisis. That was all federal regulators. There's a report on the FDIC's website, Managing the Crisis. Look it up. Chapter 16 there. It explains how the subprime market came to be. It was all the regulators. And they managed to blame Wall Street greed and never be held accountable for their actions.
Fraud. And now the chickens are coming home to roost, to use the proverbial cliche. So I'm extremely concerned about what's coming. And I omitted to mention this gigantic bubble, AI-fueled bubble in the stock markets. I remember, Brandon, at the low point of the great financial crisis, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was, I think, around 7,500.
Mm-hmm.
7,500.
It's now at 52,000.
52. 7 to 52, basically. That's a big increase, isn't it? Completely insane.
No sane human being would have predicted in the financial crisis that 17 years later, 18 years later, the Dow would be at 52,000. It bears.
Yeah, no, I might have, because stock market works in cycles. There was a internet stock bubble. Well, we're just about due for another stock bubble, and it's the AI this time. And if you have a stock bubble, the entire stock market goes up to an insane level. I couldn't have predicted exactly which year it would happen. But the fact that you have a stock market hitting all-time highs 26 years after the internet stock bubble, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. About time we were due for another bubble.
There's no relationship to economic reality, so we're in real trouble. I'm very, very concerned about this, and I think this story is going to end up predicted in the financial crisis that 17 years later, 18 years later, the Dow would be at 52,000. It bears no relationship to economic reality, so we're in real trouble. I'm very, very concerned about this, and I think this story is going to end up swamping the wars in Europe and West Asia, because it's going to become more damaging to.
Oh yeah, it's going to get to the point where Trump basically surrenders to Iran, because stock market might crash, oil will be well over 100, and he'll be panicking.
The global economy than anything we've experienced to date.
I agree. We've had some guests on in the last few days who have sort of a, shall we say, more Pollyanna view, and I sort of just, I nod my head, but I don't agree with what they say about this. It does seem like the great financial crisis on steroids, and part of it is because, these really weren't, as you know, these really weren't solutions. In fact, in some cases, they just kicked the can down the road, made everything worse. But even the ability for our financial institutions, our government, to weather a storm like this again, they're not there anymore, are they? I mean, we can't.
Yeah. The banks are less healthy now than they were back then. The economy is a lot weaker now than it was back then. Yes, we're not going to handle another financial crisis well.
There's not enough bailouts in the world that could potentially stop what could be coming from all these different problem sets.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where the debt to GDP ratio in the United States was during the great financial crisis, but if I vaguely recall, it was around 75, 80%.
Yeah.
It's now in excess of 120%.
Yeah.
Then you've got Japan, which is in a world of pain. It has a debt to GDP ratio of about 250%. And the economy has been hollowed out by the Plaza Accords. It has an aging population, and it's outsourced pursuant to the Plaza Accords.
Japan has plowed $4 to $5 trillion into the United States stock market, bond market, treasury market. I feel bad for them. They only get back a fraction of what they put in. They help prop up our insane consumer spending for decades in the United States, but now the tide is reversing. Instead of propping us up, they're now going to start dragging us down. And we are too weak. Any dragging, and we'll plummet.
A lot of the heavy industry that was in Japan has now been exported abroad. So that in and of itself is a huge problem, which I don't think the United States is going to manage. You have a confluence of issues here that the West is less able to cope with now than at any point in our lifetimes. So all of this, I think just militates in favor of maximal effort to bring to an end these wars. Because what we need at this particular point in time, and I'm not hopeful that this is going to happen, but we need an unprecedented degree of international cooperation and détente in order to sort through these problems. But instead, the wars seem to be escalating, which is exactly the opposite of what we need in order to manage it. Even in the best of circumstances, this would be a very, very difficult problem or set of problems to solve.
Yeah. And just, yes, and I want to get to that too in 1 second, but just.
Actually, even in the best of circumstances, this would be an impossible problem to solve. It's not the structural problems like $40 trillion of debt, U.S. debt. There is no solving that. That is basically entering debt spiral territory where the interest costs just become unpayable and you have to print your money and you have to print more and more money just to keep funding your deficit and your currency collapse. Just the 40 trillion debt is unsolvable. That's not even talking about all the other problems.
To sort of close the loop on the economic side, Ray Dalio, the legendary investor, has been running around saying, look, this is the AI sector is a bubble, and it's very akin to best case scenario, the 2000.com bubble. Yet Jensen Huang of NVIDIA keeps saying, no, the bubble's 5 or 10 years away. It's not going to happen.
That's a joke. That's the biggest of joke. No, not with this Iran war, pushing up commodity prices hugely, putting huge strains on basically consumers, and at the same time, interest rates, because it's going to create inflation that pushes interest rates up. And that's going to go pop to the AI bubble.
What's going on? Why do you have such a reliance by our economy on one single sector? This certainly is not a good thing. It's not a healthy country if it's one sector that's driving everything.
Well, it's that one sector because that one sector is a bubble, and bubbles become worth several times what they're actually worth. And they outweigh everything else by their nature as a bubble. And yes, it's unhealthy. It was unhealthy back in 2000 when the internet stocks was a bubble. It needs to be pop for stock prices to go back to healthy levels.
It's hard to say, man, but as far as I can tell, the major actors, the ones who have are able to deploy the largest amount of capital in the capital markets, are absolutely convinced that AI is the future to grandeur, power, and mastery of the universe. It seems and they're willing to commit absolutely ungodly amounts of capital to this really extraordinarily risky venture. They're quite apart. And I'm no expert in.
Dinner today, discussing it. Colleges, everyone's using AI. All the students, in all their papers, even the honest ones. I think AI has ruined an entire generation of kids. Because when you get to work, AI can't help you with your work when you get to work. Because if AI can do your work for you when you get to your job, then that's the company that's going to be replacing your job with AI.
AI.
Right.
But what I can tell you, what I do know, is that in order for the potential of AI to be realized, you're going to require gargantuan amounts of energy, huge amounts of energy. You're also going to require a lot of water, and you're going to have to deal with the problem that there's increasing opposition amongst ordinary citizens to having AI data centers located near their communities for perfectly valid reasons. That in and of itself raises very serious questions about whether, the best prognostications of, the fans of AI can be realized. And I think part of the motivation that, the United States has for waging these wars of aggression in oil-rich regions like Venezuela and West Asia is that, the techno oligarchs need energy. They've decided they need cheap energy. Right. And I think they're very much driving the bus on this. But at the end of the day, I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to achieve their objectives.
Yeah, neither am I. And I'll just also point out for the audience, I keep repeating this, but I think it's worth noting. The United States presently has more than 4,000 data centers and counting.
That's a lot of data centers.
Whereas China has only about 367. And I realize the data centers, there's a lot of different definitions of it, but just very basically, we keep being told we got to get data centers to beat China because otherwise our AI is going to be invalidated by China's. I don't even know how it.
I think quality over quantity might be the best approach to AI. And in that sense, I think China is beating us.
How is this is this really the data center craze really about some kind of new economy, or is it about building a better surveillance state right here in the United States?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think it definitely has a lot to do with the latter.
Me too.
And as
that's the elite's desperation to have a better surveillance state because they're terrified what will happen when then the inevitable collapse of the dollar happens. Yeah, they want a surveillance state. They're terrified about the anger of the people.
As they see, the proverbial shit hitting the fan, they're becoming more and more determined to be able to control the population.
That's right. Because shit's going to get real here very soon, I think.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And speaking of the war, the 96-hour.
In other words, the whole AI bubble is built in part on desperation, on desperate wishful thinking of the elites.
150-day war. It looks to me like the president has resolved to wage an economic war. But I saw a report today, and now it was from an account I don't normally follow on Twitter, so I don't know if it was accurate, so feel free to correct me. But supposedly the Chinese already indicated publicly they're not going along with the Trump.
Yep, I read that story. Chinese said, fuck you to Trump when he said, help us sanction Iran.
Administration's new round of sanctions on Iran. What does that mean exactly? First of all, for the prospects of this economic war, and second of all, for the sort of future place of America. Because it used to be Washington said, don't do something. A lot of the rest of the world, including China, would often follow, but that's not the case anymore, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the Chinese adopted what is known as blocking legislation. I think it was back in 2021. And my understanding about blocking legislation, the way it works in the case of secondary sanctions, is when when a country like the United States, a government like the United States, applies sanctions to is in a third country that are doing business with the ultimate target of the sanctions, what the government of that third country does is it says, if you comply with the U.S. sanctions, we are going to penalize you. And so basically, they incentivize their domestic businesses to disregard the U.S. sanctions. Now, as I understand it, the Chinese never actually used that legislation until a few months ago. I think it was in May. And they actually implemented blocking regulations with respect to a number of refineries in China that were buying Iranian oil. All indications are that China has continued throughout that time to be the biggest buyer of Iranian oil, somewhere in the range of 90%. Now, apparently, there was a report today on oilprice.com that the Iranian oil that is being stored offshore, I think a lot of it is in Singapore, Malaysia area, is almost completely bought up. But to the extent that the Chinese can continue to access Iranian oil, I think they're absolutely determined to do that. And if the United States decides to, the U.S. government decides to really push this issue, you could end up with a massive trade war between China and the United States, which is the
last thing we need, is what he's going to say. And yes, with soaring commodity prices, plummeting value of U.S. Treasuries, long-term bonds are losing value because of the fear of inflation. At a time where Treasury needs to sell trillions in debt to finance this bloody, stupid Iran war. Yeah. Last thing we need is a trade war with China.
last thing we need right now. Right. This is a disaster. You know,
especially because we didn't win the last one.
You know, I mean,
and China controls the rare earths, remember?
What we should be doing is trying to reduce trade tensions rather than escalate them. So I'm not sure how serious the Trump administration is about carrying out this threat. Yeah. I understand that the legislation which they're contemplating to empower the administration to impose these secondary sanctions leaves a lot of discretion to the White House. And I would imagine that they're going to tread a little bit carefully here because things could really spin out of control quickly. But I don't think for one second that the Chinese are, and it's not just about Iran, it's not just about access to oil. There's a larger principle here, and that is that China doesn't want anybody dictating to it with what countries it can trade. The United Nations, these sanctions imposed by the United States.
Yeah. How dare you, the United States, tell us who we can trade with? Trade between Iran and China should only be a matter between Iran and China. The United States should not get a say.
The most recent rounds of sanctions have not been approved by the UN Security Council. If the U.S. brought them to the UN Security Council, Russia and China would almost certainly veto them. And so China is under no international legal obligation to comply with these U.S. sanctions. So they're, just as a matter of principle, I don't think they're going to accept the U.S. dictating to them whether or not they can trade with Iran. And then there are other countries as well. There's look, when I was in Turkey and Iran, I learned that there was actually a quite significant trading relationship between Turkey and Iran. There's a significant trading relationship between Pakistan and Iran. And of course, there's a lot of trade between Russia and Iran, principally through the Caspian Sea. You know, how is the Trump administration going to stop all of that? So where this is all going to lead...
The U.S. has no power over the Caspian Sea because the Caspian Sea is a landlocked sea. So our powerful Navy can't even get in there. It is entirely a Russian lake. Let's show you. The Caspian Sea here. Yeah, we can't do jack shit about that. Our powerful Navy, there's no way to get it in there. That lake belongs to Russia.
I think is to failure in the sense that it isn't going to cause Iran to capitulate these now, these doomsday sanctions that Donald Trump is talking about. And I think that means that we're going to end up returning ultimately to the hot war.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is where Mario and I get into a debate because I think that's right, is we're heading back some level. I don't know what. It could be just another round of bombardment. It could be, it could very well be cooking off a tactical nuke over Pickaxe Mountain. It could be an attempted landing of troops on Karg Island or Kashem or somewhere like that. Mario doesn't agree, though. He thinks that this is sort of and Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, former Air Force colonel, yesterday she said this to me. She thinks this is Trump's off ramp, that he's going to just say, "I'm out. Economic war is where we're at. We're going to do that," and then basically, sort of, Iran will ultimately begin charging tolls. Ships will begin paying it. Trump's just going to look the other way and just say, "Hey, we've got an economic war going on." I don't know if that's right. Do you think there's any?
That won't work because Iran won't charging tolls until it has an agreement with Trump. It knows the midterms are in November. It's not going to open the Strait of Hormuz before then unless Trump signs a deal with them, unless Trump capitulates. If it doesn't capitulate, the whole strait close right up into the November election. Then after the November election, it might consider opening them with a fee if there's no deal with Trump by that time. But they will do everything to maximize damage to Trump in the midterm, and boy, will that damage be big.
Any merit to that belief?
Well, what the Iranians are saying is that they want reparations.
Right.
They're not going to be satisfied with the freedom to impose tolls or fees, whatever you call them, in the Strait of Hormuz.
Exactly, especially before the midterms. Zero chance of Iran opening the Strait of Hormuz before the midterms.
The Iranians are very, very serious about enforcing a withdrawal of Israeli forces from Lebanon. I don't think they're going to throw Hezbollah under the bus.
I don't either.
Agreed. Hezbollah, and you started this latest conflict with Israel in support of Iran. No way Iran is going to throw them under the bus.
Zero chance of that happening, nor are they going to throw Ansarallah under the bus. Right. And Ansarallah is demanding the lifting of the more than decade-long Saudi blockade, which has caused...
Palestinians, though, that's the one area they're not an ally of Iran. They're not a proxy of Iran. They do have a lot of sympathies for the Palestinian people, and they might make some insistence there, but if there's any place they're not going to push Israel too hard, it's on the Gaza issue, because Hamas is Netanyahu's pet monster that he funded for over a decade with Qatari cash. Hamas isn't an Iranian proxy, so there might be different. But yeah, Hezbollah and the Houthis, Iran won't abandon them.
Incalculable suffering in Yemen. So there is also the question of sanctions. Is the U.S. going to lift the sanctions? There's the frozen assets. They're demanding that those be returned.
The frozen sanctions, frozen assets that might or might not be returned, but the sanctions, that's actually key for the tolling, because Western boats cannot pay the toll to Iran without being worried about being hit by U.S. sanctions. So if Trump wants the Strait of Hormuz opened, and he's okay with the tolls, he'll need to carve out a sanction exception so ships can pay them.
Right. So I don't think that Trump can simply walk away from this, say, okay, we'll let them, charge fees, tolls, whatever in the Strait of Hormuz, and we're done with it. There's going to have to be a hell of a lot more concessions made by the U.S. government, I think, in order to cause Iran to stop the hostilities with U.S. allies in the region, and especially Israel.
I agree. And speaking of Israel, we saw the recent attack.
Yeah, as if Israel doesn't have enough conflicts that it's engaged in. It's now starting shit with Turkey.
In Syria by Israel against a base that supposedly the Turks were getting ready to take over and station planes and troops.
It's hilarious how hyper-aggressive Israel is and how it's just so gung-ho and starting all these conflicts.
Out of within Syria. Israel Hayom, and I've been talking about this for the last day because I'm fascinated by this. Israel Hayom is the paper that Miriam Adelson owns in Israel. And they did a long-form essay talking about how the Israeli military has been very closely studying Article 5 of the NATO Charter, because Israel is very dedicated right now to picking a fight with Turkey, but they obviously don't They obviously don't want to trigger Article 5.
That's hilarious. I thought they would wait till after the Iran war was done and settled before they started picking a fight with Turkey, but apparently not.
Their solution is that Article 5 will not be automatically or activated if they kill Turkish troops in Syria or in northern Cyprus. It has to be on Turkish territory. To me, this all sounds very, very silly.
It
Do you
does.
think the Europeans share that interpretation of Article 5, especially considering all the scheming they've been doing with European troops in Ukraine and trying to get them killed to trigger possibly an Article 5? Is this a miscalculation by Israel?
Well, I don't think anybody really knows what Europe or the United States would do if there was an attack on a NATO country. Okay, but
I don't think Europe or the United States would rush to Turkey's aid. Europe is already all in on Ukraine and fighting Russia. They don't want to get involved in a war against Israel. Oh, this is so silly.
by Israel or Russia, we would be into uncharted territories. And I think it really would depend largely on what are the circumstances that time, and particularly what are the circumstances of the attack. But the idea that Europe or the United States are going to come to the defense of Turkey if it is attacked by Israel is so laughable as
Yes.
to be. Like really, you have to wonder about the intellectual capabilities of anybody.
I think, yeah, no one's seriously thinking that Europe or United States will come to Turkey's aid against Israel. But what is relevant is Article 5 and what can trigger it. If Israel takes action that should trigger Article 5, and yet it doesn't, that undermines the entire concept of Article 5 and the very idea of NATO. And at a time where you have the Ukraine war and trying to get Ukraine into NATO and that whole conflict, undermining NATO is what a lot of people in the West don't want that to happen.
Who suggests that Europe and the United States are going to attack Israel if it attacks Turkey. I don't think anybody in the Israeli political elite believes that. I don't think Miriam Adelson.
Fam, Star Wars YouTube channel posted their resume of Rebels. I think that's a good video to summarize the show. Well, we could watch that afterwards. Hopefully it's not too long.
Believes that. But this sounds to me, it sounds like a lot of chest thumping that Israel is going into an electoral campaign. And it's like, the Israeli population is so committed to war and they love this kind of machismo and everything. We are the big bully on the block. That this is like an attempt to win votes. This is my best guess. I'll tell you this, Brandon. I don't believe for 1 second that Turkey is interested in Israel is interested in attacking Turkey. Okay. Israel's a mess. Israel can't even handle the axis of resistance. And they're going to take on the second biggest army in NATO? Are you kidding me?
This is about control over Syria. Remember, a lot of people in Israel are wedded to the idea of Greater Israel. And Greater Israel includes basically all of Syria, practically, or at least half of Syria. And so they don't want Turkey arming the Syrian government because that'll make it more difficult for Israel to seize more territory, because it's already seized a huge chunk of land from Turkey, but it's probably going to try to seize a lot more. All right. Also, since I'm the lore guy, you can ask if something is just a BS plot, Haspel, or needs extra context, and I can give that. All right. Sounds good.
Why would they do that? Turkey has been really rather cooperative when it comes to, Fidan, the foreign minister 2 weeks ago, he said, if Israel doesn't withdraw from Gaza, we're going to take radical action. What happened subsequently is not only did Israel not withdraw, but it actually escalated the killing of people in Gaza. Yeah. I think yesterday or the day before, they killed 10 people in one strike. So I don't think Turkey's looking for a fight with Israel. I don't believe Israel's looking for a fight with Turkey. I saw a photograph of this military base that Israel struck. I don't know if that's actually...
The Turkish government might not be looking for a fight with Israel, but the Turkish people are not fans of Israel right now, or what's happening in Gaza.
Actually, the blaze, I've never seen it with my own eyes, but it looked like a complete...
It was abandoned for many years. It was abandoned for many years. Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
didn't even look usable. So why did they bomb it? I mean, it's just I
The
don't know.
whole thing is odd, but it does cut back to something is very wrong within Israel right now. I mean, they're picking.
Yeah. The U.S. empire is on the verge of collapse, and Israel's entire existence depends on the U.S. empire. So just that alone, something is very wrong in Israel right now.
Picking fights with anybody and everyone, and at some point they're going to hit a wall, aren't they? I mean, at some point they're not going to be able to keep doing what they're doing without very
True.
serious ramifications. Or will they somehow always be protected?
No. I think they're in real trouble.
I do too.
Brandon. There have been multiple reports of the Israeli media about reservists not showing up for duty. There's a suicide crisis in the Israeli military. They've suffered huge depletion of their munitions. A lot of their Merkava tanks
Yep.
have been taken out of action. They have a small army that was not constructed for long-term warfare, and they've been fighting a 3-year multi-front war. And so, I have a house in Greece half the year, and I can tell you, everywhere I go, I see Israelis. They're all over the damn place. And I also have a sister who lives in Cyprus, so I visit her from time to time, and it's the same thing. It looks to me like there is quite an exodus out of Israel. So here's sort of the wild card is that the situation.
Israel is a special country in that a huge portion of its population has 2 passports and can leave if they don't like the way that things are going in the country. You don't have that dynamic in practically any other country. And so there's very good chance that the end of Israel just comes from, a majority of its population just leaving the area and the rest collapses. If they keep going the way they're going, Israel just loses population.
So volatile, and these forces, Turkish forces and Israeli forces, for example, are in such close proximity to each other that something could happen unintentionally which triggers a war. That is a serious concern. But does Israel have a plan to attack Turkey, or does Turkey have a plan to attack Israel? Come on, give me a break, man. The Turks wouldn't even send a naval armada to accompany these humanitarians who want to deliver humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza. They wouldn't even do that. And they're going to start bombing Israel.
Yeah, it's definitely.
But I bet you there's some in Turkey that are wargaming it. I mean, even in the United States, we wargame everything. Every country wargames it. And given the attitude of the Turkish people towards Israel, I'm sure they're wargaming what a war against Israel looks like.
And like I think we might have talked about before, I've always been fascinated by the public, this public clash always between leaders in Turkey and Israel, yet they're doing business on these energy doing all the energy deals. And I don't know what to make of it, honestly. I think the whole thing is very bizarre. But it does speak to the psyche, I think, of Israel, that they're going to pick fights with anybody. The Israeli elections, I don't know how familiar you are with what's going on there, but it does look like Netanyahu is not doing well. Now, Eisenkot.
The problem is all the other politicians are basically just like Netanyahu in terms of being warmongers.
Is the so-called centrist, of course, what does that even mean? But do you think the end is nigh for Mr. Netanyahu's political future?
Well, the last poll I saw was Khan News, I think 3 days ago, which showed that if an election were held today, Eisenkot's party would win, I believe, 25 seats.
Yeah.
And the Likud would win 24. And Naftali Bennett, who once bragged about how many Arabs he had killed, his party would win like 14 seats. Mm-hmm. And then there's the rest of the Knesset is highly splintered. You can't discount Netanyahu. He has, if anything else, he has proven himself to be a political survivor. But I think he's at the end of he's now at the end of his rope. And I think the main reason for that is that Israel is a mess, and he has not achieved a single one of his objectives with respect to Iran. And this is reflected in the polls.
And just look at the global attitude towards Israel. He's made Israel into a complete pariah.
It's not me saying this. This is what a vast majority of Israelis believe, that they've accomplished nothing in their war with Iran. And Iran remains, from the perspective of many Zionists in Israel an existential threat to the country. So I think that is ultimately what is going to drive the nail in the coffin of Netanyahu. It's not because Eisenkot is some
He started a war against Iran that the United States and Israel basically lost. Yeah, and that's going to be a nail in his coffin. Agreed.
kind of an appealing character.
No.
But he doesn't seem stylistically to be,
Yeah.
an improvement on Netanyahu. He's not quite as abrasive as Netanyahu is, but there'll be continuity of policy if he wins.
There will be continuity, but I wonder, it's going to be interesting to see. I've always theorized that one of the reasons American presidents
It might sour the relationship between Israel and Trump because Netanyahu is a big part of that relationship between Israel and Trump.
the last few have been so they've gone along with a lot of what Israel wanted is because Netanyahu, the man, understands Americans and understands how to play the political system here. None of his potential successors, including Eisenkot, have that level of sort of comfort in DC. Is it possible that if Eisenkot wins, for instance, Trump is less bamboozled by
Trump would be so pissed because Netanyahu gets him into this war with Iran, then Netanyahu gets voted out, and now he's still stuck in this war with Iran. Yeah, and Netanyahu isn't even around anymore.
the Israelis, or is the money going to always override whatever sensibility there may still be left in his brain?
Well, I think if Netanyahu loses, it's the American people who are going to be less bamboozled. I always thought that Netanyahu's greatest strength, if I could put it that way, was that he looked and sounded like an American.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I think he went to MIT. I mean,
he did. He lived in the United States for a number of years.
Yeah.
So
If
he
you
knows us.
If
Yeah.
you ran into Netanyahu on the streets in New York and just you struck up a conversation with him,
Yeah.
you'd think he was a New Yorker.
Yeah, he doesn't have an Israeli accent, a Hebrew accent.
That's right.
And if you listen to people like Naftali Bennett and Eisenkot and Yair Lapid talk, you know they're Israelis. And so I think that's been the more than anything else the key to
That is actually going to have a huge impact because they sound foreign, these other Israeli politicians, whereas Netanyahu, he sounds like he could be American. Yes, that is going to be a huge impact on everything.
his success. And if he loses, I think it's going to be much harder for the Israeli government to continue to generate goodwill amongst the U.S. electorate. They're already in serious trouble in that regard. So that is
Serious trouble is an understatement.
that is going to be bad news for Israel. Maybe at the end of the day, that because of that advantage that Netanyahu brings to the table, he'll pull this out of the fire. But if he's replaced by any one of those other leading candidates to replace him, I think Israel's going to have a much more difficult time in the future garnering support amongst the American electorate in a period where they desperately need it.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely
And against the backdrop of now the U.S. military and the Israeli military merging and the CIA and Mossad merging, that's just going to add a whole big mess on top of everything.
there's the dark days ahead for the state of Israel. Where do you think the situation in Israel with Palestine is going? I mean, two-state solution, they don't really talk about this anymore. I don't even know how viable it is anymore. I don't think the Israelis really,
I think it's looking more and more likely like a one-state solution. And by one-state solution, I mean a one state, and that state isn't Israel, because I don't think Israel is going to last much longer, given the bad will they've accumulated in the region and around the world. I think that after they lose U.S. support, the rest of the region is going to start turning on Israel, and the rest of the world is not going to be excited to come to Israel's aid, because, it's sort of going to be a reaping what you sow situation. Yeah, I don't think Israel can survive without the United States.
where is that side of the story heading? Because what they're doing now is not sustainable, I don't think. So are we getting a two-state? Is there a one-state solution in the offing? Where do you think that's going?
I saw today, I was quite amazed. I've been using the phrase two-state delusion for several years. Not because
20 years ago, it wasn't delusion 25 years ago. Now it's much more delusion. After what happened in Gaza, yeah, the odds of everything working out peacefully are a lot lower now.
Because I'm opposed to it. If the
Right.
Palestinian people wanted it, and if Israel was willing to do it, and they could come to an agreement, hey, great. But because it became
The best way to put it, for between 2011 and 2022, Netanyahu, with Qatari cash, funded Hamas for those 10 years. Netanyahu funded a murderous terrorist organization devoted to the destruction of Israel. Why did he do it? He was so opposed to a two-state solution. That's why he did it. Imagine being that opposed to a two-state solution that you're willing to fund this organization devoted to your own destruction.
a practical impossibility due to all the settlements in the West Bank. And somebody in the Israeli political, I can't remember now, I just read this article this morning, somebody in the foreign ministry, I think, some senior Israeli official, used that phrase for the first time. They called it the two-state delusion.
You're on their mind.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying, I don't know if I contributed to it, but this is the one point on which I can say, I and this genocidal entity actually agree. It is a delusion now, and so I see nothing but evidence that these people, the people who run Israel and the vast majority of the Israeli population, want to exterminate or expel the entire Palestinian population from historic Palestine. It's not
Yes, that's what a large portion of people in Israel want.
just Gaza, it's also the West Bank, it's also East Jerusalem, and it's also the 1948 boundaries of Israel, the Palestinians living within that area. It's absolutely clear at this point. And so the only way that is not going to happen is if there is external intervention or if there is an internal collapse of Israel.
Or an external collapse. In this case, the United States military power around the world collapses. It withdraws from the region. And Israel is left on its own.
And I think it's likely one of those two situations are going to materialize, and ultimately Israel will not realize its objective of complete ethnic cleansing of Palestine. They're again, for all the reasons we've discussed, this is a project, a colonial project that's hanging by a thread. But no one should underestimate their willingness and their ability. They continue to have enormous destructive capacity to cause huge casualties amongst the Palestinian population. Although I think in the longer run, I've said this many times, Brandon, I continue to believe.
That's why they wanted to take out Iran. Because Iran is the one country where if Israel decided, okay, today we're just going to go unalive all the people in the West Bank and just take it over. Well, what's the one country that's guaranteed to start lobbing missiles at Israel? That's Iran.
Believe this is true. Within my lifetime, I believe the Palestinian people will be free, unless I'm run over by a bus tomorrow.
Well,
But
you're on their mind. So.
I agree. The Palestinian people will be free within our lifetime. Probably within the next 10 years.
hey, I can't think of a better way to go. I just can't believe that they are going to achieve this objective given the current state that they are in and the increasing power and assertiveness of the resistance groups in West Asia.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a sea change. It's fascinating, even just to think about where we were 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, it is fascinating to see how quickly the situation has changed. And I know we're running low on time. So in our last question, I'd like to just kind of circle back to the economy. I was talking with Peter Alexander, who's a Shanghai-based investor, a few days ago, and he was saying, China doesn't want to see their currency become. They're not setting out, rather, to create the new reserve currency. That basically, when
China has been undervaluing its currency to get a competitive edge with its exports, to boost its manufacturing sector. And if you're undervaluing your currency, you can't be the reserve currency also, because you have to have capital controls to undervalue your currency. You have to limit the amount of money people bring in, make it hard for foreigners to open renminbi accounts. And that's why they don't want to become the reserve currency right now, because suddenly the currency would be forced to appreciate, and it would devastate their manufacturing sector. So they're not excited about becoming reserve currency. That's why they've set up, I think it was pretty clever, this system where there's a settlement system in their currency. But if you want your renminbi back, you actually go to this exchange outside in Hong Kong or Singapore or whatever, and you get gold, and you get gold back. They've integrated gold into their exchange, currency exchange, to like that. They can keep their currency undervalued and still have settlement in Chinese yuan.
The alternative to the SWIFT system they've been developing, that's more of an insurance policy. In case Washington turns its sanctioning power on them, they've got the ability to still go on. At what point do the Chinese say, America, enough is enough, we're going to do our own thing?
They're not maybe... I actually disagree. No, I think they are interested in having people transact in the yuan over the dollar, because why not? It gives them the control that Washington currently have. If all trade was done in the yuan, they could be the one sanctioned or not sanctioning. Only China would be in the position to enforce sanctions. So, yeah, they're not going to start a trade war in the United States over this, but they're going to set up a system, and they're happy to everyone that wants to use it can use it.
And we're going to bring a lot of the rest of the world with us. Is that coming soon, or do you still think that might be? I mean, Jamie Dimon says it's 25 years off, but what do you think?
I hate to have to agree with Jamie Dimon, but I think he's probably in the ballpark.
Yeah.
The United States remains, this is something I raise on my program oftentimes. There's a lot of hopium in the alternative media. Mm-hmm. People say the United States is defeated, the U.S. empire is finished. No, it is a very, very potent force. It continues to have tremendous economic power. It continues to have tremendous destructive capacity at its disposal. I do believe that this empire, which is not simply a Washington-based empire, it's a Western empire. But obviously the United States is by far the most important component of that empire, that it is in decline, and the decline is accelerating. But this ain't over by a long shot. And I think China is going to have to find a way to coexist with the United States for some time to come. Now, that doesn't mean that they aren't going to increasingly separate themselves from the United States. I think they're in the process of doing that, of protecting their trade relationships with non-Western countries, fostering those relationships, developing perhaps an alternative currency, certainly an alternative payment system, building up their military capabilities so that they will be eminently capable of defending themselves if and when the attack comes. But China is going to have to cope with the United States for some time to come.
Maybe not as long as some people think. I'm thinking the next 5 years, the end for the dollar will be obvious to everyone by that point. And 5 years to 10 years, that's where the dollar is going to go into silly money territory, where it becomes silly how little a single dollar can buy.
And in the meanwhile, we here in the United States will continue to cope with a government that doesn't care about us, that cares more about over there. I keep telling people what the empire does in Gaza,
the huge treasury market, the reserve status of the dollar. It's not just inertia. It's being actively maintained by U.S. military taking out countries like Syria that aren't part of it. And with the U.S. military reaching the limits of what it can do, we're going to start having the world shift in the other direction. Even we've had the first country already de-dollarized. That was Afghanistan. They used to use the dollar as their currency in Afghanistan. Well, we were occupying it. Now they don't.
What it does elsewhere will eventually be turned inward on us. And I think that's what the data centers are partly about.
Yep. And if I might add, Brandon, in the last 2 days, Israel announced that it was not going to pursue criminal charges against the murderers of the World Central Kitchen, humanitarian workers in Gaza in April 2024. One of them was a dual Canadian-American citizen, Jacob Flickinger. Mm-hmm. If the United States government and my government, the Canadian government, are not willing to impose sanctions on a state that murders in cold blood, a citizen who is a humanitarian worker,
Yep.
It's terrible.
you know they don't give a goddamn about us, man.
That's right. It's beyond true. And there's also a group of Palestinian Americans that are, I think, a young Columbia student. Her family and her were kidnapped from their home in Palestine or in Gaza, and they're sitting in one of what is it, Katz's or Gavir's little concentration camps, and the U.S. government doesn't care. It's very scary because it used to be holding an American passport meant that sort of thing didn't go unanswered. But it's our greatest ally. So
Our greatest ally, people. Yeah, just holding our citizens in, concentration camp level conditions.
I will let you go, sir.
Thank you.
Great video. Discussing everything. The only thing they didn't discuss what was in the title, Iran prepared to bomb oil terminals. No word of that in this video. So let's have a quick look on Twitter and see if we can find out what that little bit of news was about. I guess there is no big news about that. Whatever. This will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Can watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you next video. Bye.